Imagine a room. It has no windows. The door is welded shut. Inside this room, there is a table, and on that table lies the answer to a question that has kept you awake for 10 years. Who killed them? Where did the ship go? What did the symbol mean? You are outside. You can't get in. You can only press your ear against the steel and listen for echoes. You can only look at the dust slipping under the doorframe. This is what it feels like to study history. We tend to think of history as a list of facts, dates, battles, kings, treaties. We treat it like a completed spreadsheet. But that is the sanitized version. The reality is that history is mostly a black void. It is a crime scene where the yellow tape has rotted away. The witnesses are dead, and the evidence has been rained on for 5 centuries. There are letters written in codes that no computer can break. There are ships that vanished into calm seas without sending an SOS. There are entire civilizations that disappeared overnight, leaving only warm fires and half-eaten meals. For a long time, we accepted these as unsolved. We romanticized them. We treated the unsolved mystery as a genre of entertainment. We liked the spookiness of not knowing. But that era is ending. We are currently living in the golden age of investigation. Right now, ordinary people programmers in Belgium, geneticists in California, amateur sleuths in their basements are breaking seals that have held fast for hundreds of years. We are cracking ciphers that the FBI gave up on. We are identifying bodies that have been nameless since the Cold War. We aren't just watching mysteries anymore. We are solving them. But how? How do you interrogate a suspect who died in 1890? How do you find a needle in a haystack when the haystack is the size of the Pacific Ocean and the needle has rusted into dust? To solve a historical mystery, you have to stop thinking like a historian. You have to start thinking like a hacker. You have to look for the glitches in the record. Today, we are going to learn the tradecraft of the time detective. We are going to deconstruct 3 impossible cases, one of code, one of biology, and one of physics, to understand how the impossible becomes the inevitable. Welcome to the locked room. Let's pick the lock. Chapter 1. The architecture of a secret. Before we solve anything, we have to understand why mysteries exist. A historical mystery usually forms in one of 3 ways. First, there is asterisk, asterisk, the silence. Asterisk, asterisk. This is when the data is missing. The ship sinks with all hands. The library burns down. The colony of Roanoke vanishes. There is no message left behind. This is the hardest to solve because you are trying to read a blank page. Second, there is the noise. This is when there is too much data, but it doesn't make sense. Conflicting witness reports. Timelines that don't match. The JFK assassination is a noise mystery. The Dyatlov Pass incident is a noise mystery. You have to filter the signal from the static. And third, there is the lock. This is the most taunting kind. The evidence is right there. We have the letter. We have the manuscript. We have the strange symbols carved into the rock. We can see it, touch it, scan it, but we cannot read it. It is a message sent through time, encrypted by a mind that wanted to be understood, but only by the worthy. For 51 years, one such lock sat in the evidence vault of the FBI. It was a piece of paper known as the 340 cipher, and the way it was solved teaches us the most important lesson of modern investigation. The lone genius is a myth. Asterisk, asterisk, Chapter 2. Brute force and human intuition. The Zodiac 340. Asterisk, asterisk, let's go back to San Francisco. 1969. The Zodiac killer is terrorizing the Bay Area. He isn't just killing. He is performing. He sends letters to newspapers. He demands they be published on the front page. On November 8, 1969, he sends a card. Inside is a grid of symbols. 63 symbols across, 17 rows down. 340 characters in total. The Zodiac had sent a cipher before. which was cracked quickly by a high school teacher and his wife. So, everyone assumed this one would fall just as fast. The FBI put their best cryptanalysts on it. The NSA took a crack at it. Naval intelligence tried. They all failed. The 340 became the holy grail of true crime. For 5 decades, people ruined their marriages and their sanity trying to crack it. They saw patterns that weren't there. They forced the symbols to fit their pet theories. This is the first trap of solving a mystery: confirmation bias. If you want the answer to be Arthur Lee Allen, you will twist the code until it spells Arthur Lee Allen. You have to kill your ego. You have to let the data speak. So, how is it finally broken in December 2020? It wasn't by a detective. It was by 3 guys who met on the internet. David Orenchak, a software developer from Virginia; Sam Blake, a mathematician from Australia; and Jarl van Eyck, a warehouse operator and codebreaker from Belgium. They didn't try to guess the answer. They treated the mystery like a software problem. Here is the methodology. First, they understood the code wasn't just a simple substitution, where A equals B. It was likely transposed. Think of it like writing a sentence. But instead of writing left to right, you write diagonally, or you spiral inward. The letters are all there, but their positions are scrambled. There are millions of ways to scramble a grid of 340 characters. To test them all by hand would take thousands of years. So, they built a tool. They used a program called AsDecrypt, but even the computer failed. It spat out garbage. This brings us to the second rule of solving the unknown: understand the error. If a computer can't solve a logical puzzle, it usually means the puzzle contains a mistake, a bug. The Zodiac Killer wasn't a machine. He was a human. Humans make typos. The team realized that at some point in the writing process, the Zodiac might have missed a line or shifted a column by accident. If you are trying to crack a perfect code, but the creator made a mistake in the second line, your decryption key will never work for the rest of the message. They started telling the software to break the rules. They told it, assume the author made a mistake here. Now try. Assume he skipped this row. Now try. On December 3rd, 2020, the breakthrough happened. The software spat out a fragment of a phrase. Hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. Asterisk. It was a voice from 1969. It turned out the Zodiac had used a diagonal transposition scheme, split into 3 separate blocks, with a specific error in the second block. It was a complex, messy human puzzle. When you read the full message, it's chilling. It doesn't give a name. It says, I am not afraid of the gas chamber because IT will send me to paradise all the sooner. We didn't get his identity. But we got something arguably more important. We proved that nothing is unreadable. We proved that time does not protect secrets. If you want to solve a mystery in your own life or research, look at the methodology here. They didn't work alone. They used cloud computing, and they accounted for human error. They realized that the perfect mystery was actually just a flawed puzzle made by a flawed man. Chapter 3. The Body on the Beach, the Somerton Man. Codes are intellectual. They are dry. But what happens when the mystery is flesh and bone? On December 1st, 1948, a body was found on Somerton Park Beach in Adelaide, Australia. A man, well-dressed, double-breasted jacket, tie, polished shoes, lying against the seawall with his legs crossed and a half-smoked cigarette resting on his collar. He had no ID. The labels had been cut out of his clothes. In his pocket, they found a small scrap of paper rolled up tightly. It contained 2 words, printed in a fancy font, Tamam Shud. It is Persian. It means it is finished or the end. This scrap was torn from a rare edition of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. Police found the actual book abandoned in a nearby car. In the back of the book There was a faint, handwritten code, which remains unsolved to this day, and a phone number. For 70 years, the Somerton Man was the ultimate Cold War noir mystery. Was he a Soviet spy? A jilted lover? A black marketeer? The autopsy showed his spleen was enlarged, suggesting poison, but no poison was found. He was buried under a tombstone that simply said, "Here lies the unknown man." Generations of detectives hit a wall because they were looking for paper trails. They were looking for immigration records, dental charts, fingerprints. But the man was a ghost in the system. To solve this, we had to wait for technology to catch up to the dead. In 2022, a professor named Derek Abbott finally put a name to the ghost. And he did it using the most powerful historical tool we have, genetic genealogy. Here is how you solve a mystery when the archives fail. You use the archives that are written inside our cells. The police had preserved a plaster cast of the man's bust and a few hairs caught in the plaster. That was all that was left. Abbott and his team extracted DNA from a hair that had fallen out of the man's head 70 years ago. The DNA was degraded. It was fragmented. But it was enough to build a profile. They uploaded this profile not to a police database. The man had no criminal record, but to commercial genealogy sites, the places where you upload your DNA to find out if you're Irish or Italian. They built a family tree. They looked for a man who went missing in 1948, who had no children, who fit the description. They narrowed it down to a web of 4,000 people. And 101. Carl Charles Webb, an electrical engineer from Melbourne. He wasn't a super spy. He wasn't an assassin. He was a depressed man who had separated from his wife, Dorothy. He liked poetry. He liked betting on horses. He had disappeared from the public record because he simply walked away from his life. The Taman Shad note? A poetic goodbye to a life he couldn't bear. The code? Likely shorthand for betting on horse races. Some people were disappointed. They wanted James Bond. They got a sad man who died alone on a beach. But this is the crucial lesson of investigating history. The truth is rarely cinematic. When you strip away the legend, you often find a very human, very mundane tragedy. The mystery of the Somerton Man wasn't who is this super spy. The mystery was, how can a human being fall through the cracks of society so completely? Solving the mystery restored his humanity. He isn't the unknown man anymore. He is Charles. We gave him back his name. And that is the moral obligation of the investigator. We don't solve puzzles just to feel smart. We solve them to restore order. We solve them to say, you were here. You mattered. We remember you. Chapter 4. The Noise and the Signal, the Dyatlov Pass. We have talked about codes. We have talked about DNA. Now let's talk about the most dangerous type of mystery, the event. The Dyatlov Pass incident is the final boss of Internet mysteries. 1959. 9 experienced hikers in the Ural Mountains of Russia. They pitched their tent on a slope called Kholat Syakhl, the Dead Mountain. That night, something happens. They cut their way out of the tent from the inside. They run into the snow without shoes, without coats, in -30-degree weather. Some are found dead by a cedar tree, with burns on their hands. Others are found deeper in the ravine, with horrific internal injuries, skulls fractured, ribs crushed, but no external bruising. One hiker is missing her tongue and eyes. There were traces of radiation on their clothes. The Soviet government sealed the files. For 60 years, the theories ranged from the plausible to the insane. Yetis, aliens, secret military parachute mine testing, infrasound-induced panic, KGB hit squads. Why was this mystery so hard to solve? Because of ***, the noise. There were too many weird details. The radiation? Likely contamination from laboratory work one hiker did. The missing tongue? Scavengers' decomposition in the stream. The internal injuries? Crushed by snow. But the core question remained. Asterisk, why did they run? Experienced hikers don't panic. They don't run naked into the snow unless they are certain that staying in the tent means instant death. The solution didn't come from a detective. It came from asterisk animation technology used in the movie Frozen. In 2021, Swiss scientists Johann Gaum and Alexander Puzrin applied snow avalanche simulations to the slope. Critics had always said, it wasn't an avalanche. The slope wasn't steep enough, and there was no evidence of a massive snowslide. But Gaum and Puzrin discovered something called a slab avalanche. It wasn't a massive, cinematic wave of white powder crashing down the mountain. It was something far more subtle and far more deadly. The hikers had dug a cut into the slope to pitch their tent. This was standard procedure, but they did it in a spot where the wind deposited heavy layers of snow. Over the course of the night, katabatic winds brought down heavier, denser snow that piled up above the cut they had made. It created a snow slab. Imagine a block of concrete waiting to slide. It didn't happen immediately. It waited. It waited for hours, while they slept, while the temperature dropped, while the bonds between the snow crystals slowly grew brittle. And then, snap, a block of solid snow, perhaps only the size of a dinner table, but weighing tons, detached and slid just a few feet. It slammed into the tent while they were sleeping. This explains the injuries. It wasn't a monster beating them. It was the weight of the mountain crushing their chests against the hard ground of the tent floor. It caused the internal trauma, the broken ribs, the fractured skulls, without breaking the skin. It was like being in a car crash in slow motion. Panic ensued. They cut the tent because the zipper was crushed or buried. They ran because they feared a second larger avalanche was coming. They were injured, disoriented, and freezing in the dark. The paradoxical undressing, where hypothermia. Victims strip off their clothes because their failing brains trick them into feeling incredibly hot, explains the nudity. The missing eyes and tongue? The grim reality of scavengers finding the bodies before the search party did. The mystery of Dyatlov Pass wasn't a horror movie. It was a tragedy of physics. A rare delayed slab avalanche hitting at the worst possible moment. We solved it not by speculating about aliens, but by using code designed to animate snow in a Disney movie. We used a simulation to recreate the past. We have looked at code, the zodiac. We have looked at biology, Somerton Man. And we have looked at physics, Dyatlov. Now we must look at perspective. Chapter 5. The Ghost Cities, LIDAR, and the Amazon. For 500 years, history books have told a specific story about the Amazon rainforest. We were told it was a pristine wilderness, a green hell. We were told that aside from small scattered tribes, no massive civilization could exist there. The soil was too poor. The jungle was too aggressive. You might be thinking, this is great, but I don't have a LiDAR scanner. I don't have a DNA lab. I don't have a supercomputer. But you have something the original detectives didn't have. You have the archive. We are living in the first moment in human history where the entirety of the world's knowledge is indexed and searchable. The police files for the Jack the Ripper case are online. The high-resolution scans of the Voynich Manuscript are free to download. The chaotic radio logs of the Amelia Earhart search are available to anyone with Wi-Fi. The barriers to entry are gone. The only barrier left is methodology. If you want to stop watching mysteries and start solving them, here is the 3-step framework used by the best open-source investigators in the world. Step 1. Go to the primary source. This is where 99% of people fail. Most people learn about mysteries from a YouTube video, ironic, I know, or a blog post, or a podcast. But every time a story is retold, it changes. It's the telephone game. A strange noise becomes a scream. A torn piece of paper becomes a suicide note. If you want to solve the case, you have to ignore the lore. Go to the original police report. Read the coroner's autopsy. You will be shocked at how often the mystery dissolves. Step 2. Contextual empathy. You cannot judge the actions of the past by the logic of the present. People ask, why didn't the Dyatlov hikers just call for help? Because they didn't have satellite phones. People ask, why didn't the police check the fingerprints? Because there was no database. To solve a historical puzzle, you have to simulate the mind of the person in the maze. You have to understand what they feared, what they believed, and what tools they had. You have to live in their limitation. The Zodiac Code wasn't cracked by thinking like a 2020 computer scientist. It was cracked by realizing the killer was a sloppy, arrogant human being in 1969 who made mistakes. Step 3. The razor and the zebra. There is a principle in medicine. When you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. The simplest explanation is usually the right one. Occam's razor. The Somerton man wasn't a spy. He was a sad, lonely engineer. The Dyatlov hikers weren't killed by aliens. They were killed by snow. And this is the big, but sometimes it is a zebra. Sometimes the city is hidden in the jungle. Sometimes the CIA is involved. The art of investigation is knowing when to use the razor to cut away the nonsense, and when to put the razor down and accept that the truth is stranger than fiction. The final truth, we are drawn to these stories, not because we like darkness, but because we hate the void. We hate the idea that a person can live a full life and then vanish without a trace. We hate the idea that a civilization can build pyramids and then be swallowed by the leaves. We hate the loose end. Solving a historical mystery is an act of rescue. When we identified the Somerton man as Charles Webb, we didn't just solve a puzzle. We brought a man home. When we mapped the Amazon, we acknowledged the millions of people who live there. History is a broken mirror. It is shattered into a billion pieces and buried in the mud. We will never put it all back together. The picture will never be perfect. But every time you decode a cipher, every time you find a lost ship, every time you correct a false record, you pick up one shard of glass and put it back in place. You make the reflection a little clearer. The world is full of locked rooms, but you have the keys. You just have to learn how to turn them. So, pick a case. Download the file. Ignore the rumors. Look at the data. Because the next impossible mystery isn't going to be solved by an agency, or a government, or a corporation. It's going to be solved by you. Start digging.